Hi, this is Garen. Today we're going to be filling in our SRED forms. Now this is usually quite boring, so I'm going to try to make it as exciting as I can. That's going to be a little bit tough, but I'm going to give you some hints and some tips and tricks of how to maximize your claims and how to fill these forms in very quickly. Now you can fill them in yourself. We'll see how you fill in the PDF forms, and you could submit them to the government with your corporate tax returns. So we're going to go through everything, understand how to do it very efficiently, figure out how to maximize your claims, and be able to submit the claims yourself to the government without having to engage a consultant. Stay tuned, here we go. The first step is to download the T661. So go into your search engine, type in CRA T661, and the first link should be this Canada Revenue Agency, and let's go download the fillable PDF. Now, it's important not to open the PDF in your browser because you won't be able to use the fillable function. So we're just going to open up in Adobe Acrobat or use any of the tools that you have that will open up an Acrobat file. So let's go to Adobe Acrobat now, and here's our file. Perfect. Just need to expand that a little bit and put the name of your company in here. Now, if you're not sure of your business number, simply copy your business name, and we're going to go back to our browser, and there is an IZ search for federal corporations in Canada. I'll put this link in the notes of the video. So you can put in the corporate name. The beginning of the corporate name is usually good enough, and it comes up with the search engine finding the actual business number here. The business number typically ends in RC 0001. It could be another number here. Be sure to copy the entire business number and take that and paste it into the business number of the T661. You don't need your social insurance number. Let's put the start date. For example here, we're going to use 2023 January 1st. And we're going to go to 2023, December 31st. And again, for the purposes of example, we're going to just have one project. There could be multiple projects. Often companies have 2 or 3 projects, but just to show you how to fill in this form, we're going to use one. I'm going to put in my name over here as the person, as the contact for the financial information and for the technical information. Put your phone number in. Don't put any spaces in. It will automatically put in other spaces for you. We're going to leave the fax number blank. There's no need to enter it, but you do need to put in a phone number and your name over here. The next question is, was this claim filed for a partnership? We're going to say no. Again, if you have a partnership, you should probably consult an expert on what to do and put the partners in here and the percentage of the business that they own. So that's it for part 1 of the T661. Part 2 of the T661 is where we put in all of the information that we need for our projects. This is the critical component of your SRED claim, and we're going to figure out how we could maximize our claim and very quickly enter the information that we need. And I'm going to give you some tools of how to make this as efficient as possible. So the first thing we need to add is our project title. I would strongly suggest that instead of adding all the information here, that you go back and use a word processor to be able to enter the information in a way that you can change and optimize so you have the right data for your claim. You also need to adhere to the rules associated with the T661 and the number of words that you have. But for right now, we're just going to copy our sample project and we're going to go put it into the T661 right here. The project start date, if it was from a prior year, it could be before your fiscal year start date. But for our purposes, we're going to say this started within the fiscal year and it started in March. And we don't expect it to finish during the fiscal year. In fact, we expect it to finish after the fiscal year. So we'll say it's going to finish in June of 2024. Now, the field of science codes, again, let's go back to our internet and have a look at field of science codes. The easiest way is on that page that you had to download the PDF. At the bottom here, there's a related document called the T4088. Click on that. And I would just take a look at the HTML version. This gives you a lot of information of how to fill in the T661. We're going to skip down to almost at the bottom here where they have the list of codes. And because we're a software development company, we're going to put in software engineering and technology, which is that code over there. This is not a continuation of a previously claimed project. It's the first time we're claiming it, so we'll click on this button over here. We didn't do the work in collaboration with any other businesses. If you did, you would need to enter the information here. And now we're going to get into the project descriptions. We're going to complete section B, which is the project descriptions for the CRA. This is the part where you're showing the CRA that your project qualifies for the SRED program. So it's really important that you provide information that the CRA is looking for, and you don't provide information that the CRA doesn't really care about. So focus on the technical uncertainties. Do not focus on the business challenges that you've had. So I'll show you now how each of the questions, which has a specific word limit. The first question is 350 words, the second one is 700 words, and the last one is 350 words. How to go about making sure that you're entering the right information and how to do it nice and simply. Here's the T661. We're back at section B, line 242. What scientific or technological uncertainties did you attempt to overcome? So I prepared a project already, and I did it in my word processor. It's easiest for you to do it this way, and that way you can make sure that everything in here is accurate. Now, I'll have another video which will show how to construct this claim as best as possible. So we're not going to get into the details of how you actually write the claim. All I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and I'm going to paste this into my document. Whoops, wrong place. Let's go paste it in here. There we go. And we could just click anywhere on the PDF file to see how that looks. It's got all the proper spacing there, so I'm happy with that. I'll then go into the next section and go back to the work done. Now, you'll see here that the formatting, what I've done is I've put stars. Sometimes there's a little dash in order to show that it's a paragraph. If you have bullets, it won't work when you copy it over to your PDF. So you should change that so that any of the formatting, like these numbers, also won't work. So you could simply put a 1. I have to press backspace so it doesn't automatically format. And you would simply change this so you know it's going to come across into the PDF file because none of the bolding or formatting does. So I'm going to copy this whole section over here. Let's just highlight it first. Okay, fantastic. I could also go and check the word count. And I see here that we're at 574 words, which is within the 700 word limit. So that's perfectly fine. We're going to copy that and paste it into our PDF file. And then again, we could go have a look here to see what it looks like. There might be an extra space in here that we don't need. So you can clean this up. And once you've done that, you have now populated the CRA forms with the information that you need in order to convince them that your claim does qualify for SRED. And I'll just copy this last little part here. There we go. So now we have everything completed for section B of the T661. We're now in part 2, section C, and this is still for the specific project that you're working on. You'll need one of these for each of the projects that you're working on. So let's go have a look and see what we need to complete here. The first thing is that we need to show who prepared the response. I'm going to put that I prepared it. If you use an external consultant, you could click them also and name the consultant here. This is very important, which is the key individuals directly involved in the project and indicate their qualifications or experience. So if I were to put myself as one of the people who was directly involved with the project, I put something like software development for 10 years. I might have a BSc in computer science, whatever it is that the individual has. And I would put as many people who are key to the project here as possible. If there's more than 3, you don't need more than 3, just put the 3 most important people here, and then also put their qualifications and experience. The CRA does sometimes check that these people exist and that they do have the experience. They'll check LinkedIn, so be sure to be accurate here. The next question is, are you claiming salary or wages from outside of Canada? Typically, that would be no. Is there SRED carried out on behalf of another party? So this is if you're a consultant doing work for someone else, it would typically be no. And are you claiming expenditure for SRED performed by people other than your employees? We're also going to put no here. The last component is putting the evidence that you have to support your claim, that if the CRA were to come review your claim, what could they have a look at? So you would have maybe some architecture information, you might have records and timesheets, you might have some testing data. So anything that you have, you would put a click over here to make sure that you can show that if the CRA comes. Part 3 is the calculation of the SRED expenditures. Some of it pertains to specific projects, but some of it pertains to the general SRED claim. So we're going to go through the details of how this all works. It can get a little bit complicated, so if you need some assistance, feel free to reach out to us. Let's get into the details here. So the first question is, how do we calculate the SRED expenditures? A vast majority of companies will use the proxy method. The people who use the non-proxy method or the traditional method are those who have relatively few employees and a lot of other expenses associated with their SRED claims. So typically this would be companies that are in the manufacturing sector. Let's scroll down here. And the first question is, the portion of salaries or wages of employees directly engaged with SRED, so those other than specified employees for work performed in Canada. So let's just think about this for a second. Let's assume we had 2 employees, each paid $75,000, and we did all the calculations throughout the year, and about 2/3 of their time was spent on SRED-eligible activities. What that means is that we now have $150,000, which is 75 times 2, times 2/3, so it's $100,000 of SRED-eligible expenses of work performed in Canada. So we would put the $100,000 in there. Then the question is, how much did specified employees work in Canada? So for a specified employee, that would be someone like myself who would own more than 10% of the company. If you own 10% of the company or more, you are officially a specified employee and you would have to put your remuneration on a separate line. So let's do that here, and let's assume that I worked for $60,000. I got paid for the entire year, and half my time was on SRED. So I'm going to put in $30,000 here, and that is line 305. So the total of line 305 and 306 is $130,000. Then you could put for work performed outside Canada, but we said we don't have any. And so we'll put that at 0. Salary or wages identified on prior years, we're going to put that as 0. There's a whole bunch of other questions that we're just going to put zeros here. Now, just so you understand, if you leave it blank, the CRA will assume it's a 0, but I like to put zeros in so I know that I've read the question, I've been able to answer it. So I'm going to put zeros in for all of these. Again, if you're questioning, are they 0 or should I put a number in here, it's best to reach out to us because we have the expertise to advise you if it is appropriate to fill these in with non-zeros. This is for contractors. So sometimes you'll use a contractor to do some work for you, and this could be all sorts of different types of work. Anything that might relate to SRED, but we're going to assume that we had no contractors and we didn't have any overhead. Now, it says that if you use the proxy method, you have to put 0 in here. So we're just going to do that. There were no third-party payments. So when I add everything up, we're still at $130,000. Let's try that again. This section, which is section C, is where we get into the nitty-gritty of the SRED calculation. We'll need some forms that are for your provincial SRED calculation, but we're not going to go through that in this video. We have different videos that show the provincial SRED calculations because they can be quite complex. So let's get into the section C of your SRED calculation. The first one is line 420, just wants you to duplicate what's in the row above, which is $130,000. We're going to assume that the provincial government assistance was $13,000, but it will be specific to whatever province you're in based on the calculations that are made. The next is the government assistance for other government assistance that you would receive, and that, frankly, can be any other government assistance that grinds down your SRED claim because the government doesn't allow you to double dip. So we're going to assume that we didn't get any IRAP or any other type of government assistance, and the rest of these are going to be zero for us. So our subtotal here is going to be $130,000 minus $13,000. So we're going to end up at $117,000. Fantastic. The next thing is we add repayments of government and non-government assistance. So we're going to put that as zero. Now, this is an important one where, once again, if you have a prior year SRED claim, please reach out to us and we'll help you navigate this. It's about your SRED pool balance. So we're going to put in zero. Maybe this is the first year that you filed your SRED claim. And so we're going to transfer all of these to be zero, and we're still ending up with $117,000. Deduction SRED claimed in the year, we're going to put zero, and so our pool balance is going to remain at $117,000. Now we're going on to part 4. Part 4 of the SRED claim continues to go through all the financial calculations, and you'll see it's quite similar to what we did before, but there are some additional information that we need to enter. So the allowable SRED expenditures from line 380, that's the $130,000 that we had. Payment of prior year's unpaid amounts, we're going to have this at zero. The prescribed proxy amount, complete part 5, enter zero if you use the traditional method. So now we're going to go and complete part 5 so we could have this information populated. Scroll down a little bit, and here we are at part 5, which is calculation of the prescribed proxy amount. Salary or wages or employees other than specified employees. So remember, that was our $100,000 for everyone aside from the specified employees. The bonuses we're going to assume was zero, and the subtotal then will be $100,000. Let's put an extra zero in there. So the name of the specified employee we have to put, and remember, that's someone who owns more than 10% of the company. So the salary or wages for the year, that is SRED and non-SRED. So we had $60,000. And we said that 50% qualified for SRED, and multiply 2 by 3, we have $30,000. Now we need to figure out what the yearly maximum pensionable earnings is. So I'm just going to copy this and go back to my browser, and I'm going to try to find out what the yearly maximum pensionable earnings is for 2023. And I see here that it's $66,600. So we could use that number now in our SRED claim. In fact, we need a little bit of a calculator. So we'll bring up our calculator for $66,600 times 2.5. So we have $166,500 in here. So which column is less? Column 4 or column 5? Obviously, $30,000 is a lesser amount. We then put the sum of all of the specified employees over here and transfer it over here. And so the line 118 is the sum of 116 and 114. So we have our $130,000. In section B, we enter 55% of the salary base in line 118. So let's go back to our calculator. It would be $130,000 times 0.55 is $71,500. So before we go into part 6, we're just going to use that $71,500 in the previous form that we have to fill out. So go back to part 4 here, and it asks for the prescribed proxy amount, and now we know it's $71,500. We're going to put in 0 here, and we're going to add these two up. So that's $201,500. What provincial government assistance? Remember, we put in the prior form that we had $13,000 from provincial government and 0 for other government, and we're going to put a 0 in here. So the last one that we want to make sure that we have an accurate number for is contractors. So if we used a contractor, we would put in 80% of the amount that we pay to that contractor. But we didn't use a contractor, and therefore it's going to be 0. And there's a bunch more 0 here. These are for arm's length transactions for contracts. All of these numbers, if you need assistance with, we're happy to help you. Now that we have the total allowable SR&ED expenditures, there's a number of deductions that are possible. Instead of putting zeros in for all these, I'm just going to skip them because none of them would apply to most companies. So we're going to assume that that's all 0 in here, and this will end up being $201,500. We add repayments of assistance. Again, that is assumed to be 0, and therefore we're back at $201,500 for our total qualified SR&ED expenditures for ITC purposes. So now we go on to the next phase, because we've already entered the information in here, and that is the project costs. So for each project, it's important to have a line item here that shows you how much money was spent on that project. So let's go up to the project title to make sure we've got the correct one, because we only have one project this year. And scroll down back to that form, which is right here. There we go. And then the salary or wages in the tax year, which is, again, a total of 306 to 309. Why don't we go up to 306 and 309 just to make sure? So 306 to 309 is $130,000, which makes sense to me. Where are we? Oh, we're too far down. There we go, $130,000. The cost of materials was 0. The contract expenditures were 0. Overhead and other expenditures in the tax year, the total of line 360 if applicable. We could go check, but line 360 should be 0, and it is 0, and that's because we have been using the proxy method. So let's put a 0 in here, and you would need to add up the totals of all of the projects that you've had, but we only have one project, so we're at $130,000. We're almost done our T661. There's just a few more pieces of information that the government would like. So this is line 380 minus all these other lines, and frankly, you could go check, but this is going to be $130,000. The government also wants to know how much of the work was done in Canada by internal employees, and it's going to be 100% for us. The next question is this basic research or experimental development? A vast majority of the time for companies, it's going to be experimental development. Remember, there were 3 people in our company. The government wants to know what kind of individuals those were. So frankly, the most popular or the most important people to have as part of your claim are the people who are directly involved, who have the technical qualifications to undertake the research. And so that's most likely the first 2 groups of people here compared to the second 2 groups of people. So for argument's sake, we'll say we had 2 scientists and engineers and 1 technologist or technician involved in this year's project. This is a checklist of the things that are important and you must have as part of your SR&ED claim. So do we use the current version of this form? is the entered method. We used the proxy method. We did a part 2 for each of the projects. We only have one project. Over here, it's important to realize that we need to complete Schedule 31, which we will get to in just a moment. So we'll leave that blank for now. And do we need to complete any of these forms? But for us, we didn't have to, so we'll check that as done. It does also say that you need to complete your T2, which is your corporate income tax. And that means that in order to file your SRED claim, you have to have a corporate income tax return attached to your SRED claim. Do we have all the provincial forms? As I said prior, we're going to look at that at a separate video, and I'll show you how to complete all those. So we'll have our separate forms for the tax return, and then we'll have our separate forms for the provincial returns. We'll have our separate form for the SRED return and the Schedule 31. Have we retained all the documents, all those supporting documents that we talked about? And then have you looked at your T2 return and checked these boxes that those forms, which is the T661 and Schedule 31, are attached to it? So once all of those are done, you need to fill in some additional information about who prepared this claim. And this is part 9. So did you have a consultant help you? And we're going to click on no because we prepared this internally. So it says complete lines 970 and 975. So let's scroll down here. 970, we put the name of the signing officer of the corporation. So this may or may not be the same person who filled in the form. It has to be a person who's registered with the CRA as an officer. We would then put the year that the person is signing. They would end up signing it right there after you print out the form. And they would certify it again, and you could put in the appropriate name. It could be a different person who completed the form. Maybe it's the technical person, or maybe it's the accountant who completed this form. Again, the date and the signature. And that would complete your T661. We're at Schedule 31. It is really important that this is filled in. It must accompany your T661 when submitting your tax return. So the first couple of pages are simply some information about the form itself. So we're going to skip through them. And at the top of the third page, once again, you're going to enter your corporation name, business number, and tax year end. Is the corporation a qualifying corporation? A vast majority of corporations will click on yes here. There's a little bit of an explanation for what that is. And enter your taxable income from the prior year. We're going to say we lost a little bit of money last year. Really, it's not critical what this number is, but it is important that you pull the number from your prior tax return. Determination of excluded corporations. We are not an excluded corporation. We are not a corporation in the farming industry. We're going to skip that. And qualified property and qualified resource property, chances are you don't have any of that. So we're going to once again skip through all of this. We're not going to have any carrybacks. Again, if there's any information that you're not sure of here, please, the best is to reach out to us. Refund of ITCs for qualifying corporations from qualified property. Again, Part 7, we're going to skip over. So Section 8 is really important. Once again, at the top of the page, we enter the corporation's name and business number. We need to determine the qualified SRED expenditures, which is simply pulling line 559 from your T661. So we'll go over to our T661 and we'll copy that number in here. Line 560 from the T661 is 0. We'll see that over here, so we don't have to worry about that. So we add those two lines together and we end up with our $201,000. So Part 9 is again something that we need to complete. Is the corporation associated with another corporation? We're going to click on click on no. Your taxable capital, we're going to enter 0 over here. It's because chances are for a small business, you have less than $10 million of capital employed in Canada, and therefore it would be 0. I'm not going to go through the calculation in Part 10. Just suffice it to say that invariably, if your taxable capital is less than $10 million, that your SRED expenditure limit is going to be $3 million. So let's leave it at $3 million, but I would suggest that you go through and do this entire calculation. We're completing the form. And now we're at let's go here, Part 11. So we take line 350 in Part 8, which was the $201,000, multiply it by 35%. So let's bring up our calculator, and we have that times 35% is 70, well, what was that? 7525. Line 350 minus line 410. So line 410 was this $3 million, and line 350 is definitely going to be less than that. It's $201,000. So over here, we put a 0. Repayments amount from line 70 in Part 8, that was 0 also. Enter the amount of repayment or on the line that corresponds to the appropriate rate. We're going to leave this all at zeros and move that here to 0. So the current year SRED ITC is the sum of all of these numbers. And so we're going to have $70,525 as our current SRED ITCs. Part 12 is the current year credit account balance, ITCs from SRED expenditure. So ITC at the end of the previous year, we received a refund, so that would be 0. And we're going to go through all of this, but chances are you're going to have zeros for this entire form, and therefore you don't have to concern yourself with Part 12. Now we finish with Schedule 31, and we have our completed Schedule 31 and T661. You can now put these in with your corporate tax returns and file them with the CRA to get your SRED credit refunded.